Welcome, everyone. I'm delighted to now welcome Kristine Eldridge into the conversation. Chris brings valuable experience and insight from her coordination unit, where she is the nominated supervisor and educational leader. So, Chris, thank you so much for joining me today. It's lovely to have you here.
No worries at all. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. So, I know that thinking about how to use the AEDC data, I really have to, say that clearly every time I say that. It can sometimes feel a little overwhelming to educators. So I think perhaps that's a really great place for us to start our conversation. So, do you want to start off by telling us how service leaders can help family daycare educators understand and use the AEDC data in practical, really non-overwhelming ways?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us, the AEDC data came into play probably around 4 years ago. So we were introduced to it by council, and they started a project. So for our service, we actually cover a few local government areas. So looking at the data was very strange at first because it wasn't very, it's very postcode driven. So for us to pick one or two focus areas was quite difficult because across the postcodes that we work in, there was all five domains, like all four domains were covered within that space. Um, so really for us, it was about breaking it down. We didn't want to overwhelm the educators with too much information. We didn't want to scare them off wanting to use it and actually embed the AEDC data into our program. So we came up with the idea of actually having a overarching goal for our whole service where we would actually focus on a specific domain within that goal. So that process first started with us introducing the AEDC, talking to educators, and we had a meeting around it, talking to educators, introducing the data, showing them the vulnerabilities for their specific areas, and just talked through how we were going to work through all five of those domains so that we could actually enhance those vulnerabilities for children across the whole service. So then we just kind of rolled out our overarching goal each month. We focused on a different domain area. Sometimes we would extend it, so it might have been a 2 or 3 month period, depending on how big the domain was and how the feedback that we were getting from the educators. But basically, we then sent out the information that went with that domain. So the website has great tools and things that you can use that are very easy to read. They have great practical ideas of activities or ways in which you can support children to be able to build on those vulnerabilities. And so we really use that as a base and our foundation of how we actually got the educators to know and understand what AEDC was, and I guess how important it was and how much it could actually feed and fuel their programs every day.
Yeah, brilliant. There's so much there that you've just unpacked in that one question that really, really, fits with the messaging, I guess, around this throughout our webinar is the practical work that is already being undertaken in family daycare settings and how you can actually just begin to bring this to life in a little bit more manageable ways and some really, really clear, strategies to work through that process. It sounds like an amazing project. So my next question is, what kinds of conversations help educators move from, data to meaningful programming decisions?
I think the biggest step for us, Rowena, was really having those conversations with the educator in the meeting. We had the big meeting where we all came together, but then also on visits. And I guess for us, it was really being able to articulate the practice that was already actually occurring in the educator service to say, this isn't something new. It's not an add-on. It's actually part of our why. It forms part of the why as to why you're programming the way you are. And I guess being in their services and looking at their programs and actually saying to them, see these activities that you've got planned and programmed, this actually fits into this domain. And this is why. And then just having those one-on-one conversations with them using the tools that we'd sent out to them at the beginning of the month around that particular domain, and then actually just showcasing to them that it's already occurring. Now we're just actually giving them purpose as to why it's occurring.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the biggest and scariest part for educators is when you start talking data, it's scary.
Yeah. Yep.
Because it could potentially mean that there's a lot more work we have to do. And I think what was so beautiful with the AEDC that we found is that it did seamlessly just fit into our already there program. It just gave educators more purpose and more meaning behind why they were doing particular activities. And I guess it gave them the focus for particular children, maybe that they could look at the information that was provided about the particular domain and then actually really reflect on what they were doing within that activity with that particular child and being able to see maybe where there was a little bit of vulnerability for that child and then be able to build on that. So I think it's just having those relationships with the coordination unit, being able to have those open and honest discussions, but I think it's really heroing it. So really pointing out to the educators what they're doing really well, and then how they've already got it in practice. So it's not necessarily more work.
Yeah.
It's something that goes alongside or provides meaning to what they're already doing.
Yeah. That is such an important message, I think too. I'm sure there are people, watching this webinar tonight that, have that fear too that, oh no, we've already got so much to do. This is more work. But I think what you've described is such a beautiful way of using your visits as a moment of reflection to critically reflect on what we're doing and to demonstrate that actually this aligns with what you're already doing, which is really, really great, really powerful. Thank you. Okay, moving along to my next question. What examples of quality family daycare practice have you seen, particularly on your visits, that support children's language and communication and thinking skills?
Look, I think with the ADC, we really saw a shift in purpose. So while before it was, you could walk into an educator service and, there were always beautiful play spaces set up and things like that. I feel like after we introduced the ADC and our overarching group goal, it really allowed educators to set up activities with more purpose. So, I went into one educator's service and her children were actually, she had a group of children that were going to school the following year. And one of the children had excelled in picking up and reading words. So she had created a wall word for this particular child, which then encouraged other children to come in and have a go as well. They were writing the words from the walls. She was sounding them out. What I love the most when I go into educator service is that language and communication is something that is within every single play space and every single activity, routine, everything that they're doing every day is space for language and communication. So I guess just to see the journey of this particular child where she got to, 6 months down the track and she actually was then doing story time. So
Wow.
she actually picked up a book, was able to read it to the children, and it was just such a beautiful thing that she got to show her leadership skills, but she was then also became the person who was encouraging children to be involved and to have that love for language
Yeah.
and communication and those written words and how they relate to pictures and different things, because it was kind of like a child explaining it to a child. It was that whole different perspective and
Yeah.
meaning. But I think sometimes when activities are set up based on children's interests, it can lead to paths like that. And I think I think educators too, with language and communication, it's probably two things that they don't realize how often they're actually doing it. Like just saying to a child, okay, come on, we're going to go and wash our hands now. Let's go and wash our hands. Okay, rub them together. Like that's all language, and you're describing and you're creating that space to actually build that child's language capabilities, because it's going to take a month, maybe two, depending on the child, for them to then say to their friend, come on, we're going to go wash our hands now. We rub them together.
Yeah.
And it's that beautiful journey that they kind of all go on together. But I mean, even simple things like we've got educators that use home language with the children, which I think is so important. Um, and it's great that they're able to do that. I mean, it's not only great for the child because they feel like they belong, but it also creates that space where they're actually building their capacity without having the stress of having to learn that second language on top. But then the children who are there and have English as a first language are learning another language as well. And it just, they then support and, guide each other and scaffold each other's learning while the educator's providing that space for both groups of children within her service. So, having posters up on the wall with the word and the visual, and there's all those things, having a book corner that's available all the time for the children to really encourage that. But even just lunchtime, sitting down and having that conversation with them, joining in, like it's all things that educators do every day and take for granted because that's just normal to them. It's just what we do every day. That just is, it's like our job. But for these children, especially who are vulnerable in that language and communication in those two domains, it's extremely important that they're exposed to that because they may not be getting that from anywhere else. So while it's something that you as an educator feel is very basic, that's just what you do, for that child it's it's a pinnacle for them. It's a place where they can actually build on that vulnerability, which I think is so special.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I love like all of those examples that you provided as well. Such a great opportunity that we have in family daycare. And I think we have it in other types of early childhood settings, but particularly family daycare, where we often have wide-ranging age ranges and children at lots of different stages of their learning and development, and that opportunity for peer scaffolding is incredible. And all those examples as well, I think that you touched on then as well, come back to what you were talking about before about your purpose. They really demonstrate that intentionality of practice and things like that as well, which is wonderful. Thank you. All right, what is my next question for you? I think I've even lost my track. Okay, so this one is around the EYLF and the NQS in particular. So can you tell us how coordination units can support educators to link this AEDC evidence? You've already touched on this a little bit, but particularly how to link this with the National Quality Standard and the Early Years Learning Framework to improve quality, perhaps more strategically or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I think for us, I mean, we had actually started this project prior to an assessment and rating. And I think for us, the educators were able to talk about it, especially in Quality Area 1. I guess when it comes to the National Quality Standards, part of Quality Area 1 is really about being able to articulate that planning cycle and I guess the purpose for why you've got what you've got on your program. So it was really great for educators to be able to actually pull out all their information about the AEDC and along with their overarching goal for the month, and to kind of say, this is how we're meeting Quality Area 1. This is part of our purpose. This is part of my planning cycle. When I look at analysis, reflecting and analysing children's development, this is a tool that I use. So it definitely enhances because it provides that why and that purpose, like you said before. It then flows into other standards. You've got Quality Area 5 around interactions with children, which all of the domains cross into. So I think it partners it beautifully. Each domain area fits into an EYLF area. your language and communication fits in to the confident and competent learners and things like that. So I think for the coordination unit, it's about what we did with our overarching goal so that educators could see the links and it was easy for them, is that we would provide an overarching goal. We would then actually link the AEDC domain, provide some information. They've got to a point now where they've got all of the information there and they're really confident with the domains. So, and the subdomains within the domains. So we're no longer having to break it down as much for them. But at the start, we literally broke it right down. So into the domain, into the subdomain, and then we actually added the EYLF link as well. So we would actually put in the outcome and how that actually linked and worked together. So it was providing them with that link and opportunity, but also that further purpose. So it really, I guess, supported them again. It gave them more scope to be able to add that information into their programming. But I think it just tied everything in nicely together, and they were actually able to see that both all three documents all work together and complement each other and support each other as like building blocks, I guess, to then hit and have this amazing program that really supports outcomes for children.
Yeah, that's fabulous. It's such a good way of using it as well. Like what we've been talking about throughout the whole time here is as a tool, not as an additional work, but as a tool for the work that they're already doing, that they're already required to do as well. And I think, that coupled with critical reflection helps coordination units and family daycare educators to be able to really make it contextual for their own settings and their own the families and children and communities that they have as well, which is great.
Absolutely. And I think I've spoken a lot about, I guess, the educators and their journey through this, but it was also a journey for us as a coordination unit. So prior to being told we needed to do this project and we needed to link in and use this information to help support children, I'd never heard of it before, so it was a learning curve for me. It was really about gaining information. It was about attending training. It was then about sitting together as a team and having that reflection on how can we actually roll this out effectively with our educators that are going to it's going to support them to be excited about it and to want to use it and to not see it as just another thing that they have to do. So there was a lot of scope on the coordination unit side as well, and a lot of learning that we had to do before we could then actually roll it out with the educators. Because when you do something new, and yes, it's change and people have lots of different opinions about change and react to change very differently. So it was really for us about wanting to implement it in a positive light, not a light where it's going to be taken on as another thing. So just being very, I guess, careful and mindful. Each coordination unit would know their educators extremely well. So they would be able to, I guess, pick a way that's going to suit their educators to be able to roll something like this out. So I don't think one way fits the box. I think every service is going to look a little bit different. Every service, you might have a coordination unit that sits in one particular postcode where they would be able to just focus on one domain to start off with, because that's where their biggest vulnerabilities are. So I think it just really depends on your service, your educators, and just making sure you're working with them to work out the best way to move forward with it.
Yeah, so true. Such beautiful examples of intentional leadership as well there. Thank you. All right, now our time is ticking away, so I'm going to give you the last question that we have, and that is, what is one message that you would like educators to remember about their role in supporting children's communication and thinking?
I think it is, extremely important for educators to really, I guess, put a mirror up, to have a look at what they're already doing, to know that this is something that they do in their everyday practice already. Every single conversation, every single facial expression, every single interaction, it is all supporting children's language and communication. And I think it's important. Sometimes as educators, we don't actually sit in the moment and go, you know what, this is actually something I'm doing really well at. And I think that was part of the realization with the AEDC for our educators, is that because we took it on as something that would support their programming rather than something that was an additional to their program, I think it was really important to be able to sit there and say to them, you're already doing this. This isn't something that you're not providing in your service. It's just about now giving you the why as to why you're providing it. And I think sometimes educators don't champion themselves enough. So, I really encourage educators to go out, know that you're a superstar, and know that you're already doing this, and just make it more visual. Make it visual for your families, make it visual for your coordination unit, or for anyone who wants to see within the community, that, you do use the AEDC as a tool. And this is something that supports the program that you're implementing with the children and builds, to build their skills and vulnerabilities in particular areas.
Brilliant. Such wise words, and so important to remember that we all need to take stock every now and then and actually celebrate the amazing work that we're doing. So well done for reminding our educators of that too. So that brings us to the end. Thank you so much, Chris. There were so many valuable insights in what you shared, particularly your examples that help bring the AEDC domains in general, but also the ones that we've been particularly looking at to life, and to remind educators that there are so many powerful opportunities to support children's confidence, curiosity, and communication, as well as general knowledge, through that everyday practice. So thank you again for sharing your time, experience, and wisdom with us.
No worries at all. Thanks, Rowena.